everyone, it's Friday1940 here. Today we're going to do a quick landing tutorial on the hip, and I'm going to show you maybe just a few things that trips up people when they first start flying the hip trying to land it. And we're going to start actually on the ground. I've just created this instant action mission with 60% fuel. I think if you're a beginner you should just start with 60% or 50% fuel because it's lighter on the helicopter, it's more responsive to your inputs, and it's going to be easier for you to learn just the basics. So one of the key things that real hip pilots will do is turn this fan on. You got another one over there for the co-pilot. So what that's going to do is when the main rotor RPM drops too much, the AC generators will fail, and when they fail, these fans are going to go out. Okay, you'll also get like audio warnings, but visually seeing these fans go out probably means that the main rotor RPM's gotten too low, and if you don't fix that situation, you're just gonna fall out of the sky. So another thing to look at while we're on the ground that trips people up when they're landing is as I try to lift off, I'm not really going to do anything. I'll put my pedals in to counter the nose movement, because the nose is going to want to naturally go to the left, and so I'll put in some right pedal to counter that. But we'll watch something, because the hip is going to want to just slide to the left. I'll add some collective in. Now I'm not putting in any cyclic movement. I can try to arrest the nose pulling to the side there, but you see it's still wanting to go off to the left all by itself. Okay. What happens with the hip when it gets really slow during the takeoff phase and during the landing phase is you got to put in some right cyclic to counter that left drifting motion. Basically, it's the tail rotor and the nose are trying to swing the same opposing directions. But the opposing direction, so it's the net force that's happening is the helicopter is just sliding off to the left there. So when you're going fast in forward flight, not a big deal. You know, you naturally are putting in some pedal and you're holding probably a little bit of right cyclic. When you get really slow though, that's why people when they land, if they're not correcting for that, they're just going to tip over and crash, and I'll demonstrate that. So we'll focus on just putting the nose aligned with the flight path, and we'll see what happens when we get super slow. Okay, I'm not gonna correct for that. See how we're starting to tilt? Yep. There we go. So this is always gonna end up like this. This is really frustrating for new pilots because they don't understand why is the helicopter just drifting off to the left like that. You have to put in right cyclic. As you slow down, you got to put more and more in, and also your pedals too. At the same time, you want to put more and more right pedal in. And the key thing is just keeping the nose in the aircraft pointed forward and straight and aligned. You don't want any drifting going on because you'll tip over pretty quickly and result in catastrophic failure of flight. So let's restart this. Okay, we're back. We'll turn the fans on again. Alright, so if you're practicing landing, I recommend that you do this at an airfield with a runway, and you'll do a couple exercises, okay, especially if you're new. You basically want to get good at flying along the runway and keeping the flight path pretty much straight until you can really anticipate where the helicopter is going. Now, this is a super simple task. Eventually you want to step it up by attempting to hold the altitude as best as possible, but slow down as much as possible. Okay, so just pick whatever altitude you want, either a few hundred feet above the runway, or if you want to get more daring, you can do it closer to the runway. And you just want to slow down, but try to keep the same altitude. And notice you're going to have to pull back on the cyclic. And as you're doing that, you're lowering the collective, but you're going to eventually get back to the point where you need to add more collective in. Okay, right now I've barely got any collective in, and now I'm starting to put it back in. But it's a balancing act of staying at the altitude I want to remain at. And for beginners, it's probably the best thing to just get it to the point where you're kind of slow and you get past this shaking moment, because that's the transverse flow that's happening over the rotor system. You're basically getting the loss of all that effective translational lift, because now you're going into, you can kind of think of it as like a hover mode, and all that lift is being generated off the engine now. It's not getting any help by just simply moving forward. Now if we move forward fast enough in the hip, it's I think 50 kilometers per hour, we'll get that shaking again. See that little, it's just kind of subtle, and now we're starting to get effective translational lift, and we're building speed, and we haven't even touched the collective. Okay, it's remaining in the same spot. So mastering how to come in and out of that at the same altitude is going to help you a lot with landing, because you'll start to understand all the inputs you need to make with the collective and the cyclic at the same time to counter it. So we'll do this again. Now if you're using a runway, it's perfect because you can pretty much align yourself with an easy point of reference to go fly along, and then you can also adjust yourself and say, I want to be at a stopping point by the time I get to the end of the runway, or before that. Okay. So I'm lowering the collective down, but at the same time I've got to watch the cyclic back that I'm putting, cyclic back inputs here. Okay. Now we're getting pretty slow, and we watch the airspeed. We're also using our pedal to make sure we're still aligned, because that's really important when you get down to the landing phase. You don't want to be misaligned with your flight path, because it's going to tip the hip over. Okay, so we'll add more collective in. Now we're getting past that effective translational lift. We've come out of it. So you think of it as being in kind of like a hover mode. Okay. So because of that, we need to make sure we have more collective in than what we had when we were decelerating or when we were just doing normal forward flight, because the rotor system has to work harder to get the same sort of output. Okay. Now if you notice, while I'm in a hover here, I've got a right lean, and that's what we talked about earlier. I'm trying to counteract. If I don't do it, this is what's going to happen. The hip's just going to want to drift off to the left. Now I'm not pushing the cyclic to the left, it's just wanting to do that. So that becomes really dangerous when you're getting lower to the ground. If you don't arrest that left sliding movement, you're going to tip the helicopter over, and it's going to result in you getting angry that you've crashed the helicopter and you can't figure it out. Okay. So once again, it's normal when you're in the hover in the hip to have a right wheel nose low, right wheel low. Typically, what's going to happen when you land the hip, it's going to be right, left, and then the nose. So as you get slower, it's naturally leaning to the right, and we're trying to align with the runway. Okay. Another thing to think about is the I'll do this here. I'll show you really quick. Usually for the combat sorties I do on ECW, I'll put the radar altimeter set to 10 meters, okay? And that's basically about a few seconds before I'm going to touch down on the ground, so it alerts me that we're getting really close to the ground. Another thing that it does is, for ground effect, you can think of it as basically you're in some sort of ground effect for the diameter of the rotor system. So for the hip, it's I think 21 meters, so at about 10 meters you should get some ground effect, and obviously as you get closer it's going to become stronger and stronger. So something that can help you when you're landing is you don't have to fully arrest the descent and come to a perfect hover and come down. If you can get yourself into that 10 meter, 5 meter ground effect, you'll feel that cushion of air, and it's gonna help you slow down your rate of descent just a tiny bit. It's not gonna do a lot, but you'll definitely notice the effect, so you don't have to fight with the collective to try and arrest the descent. Okay, so we did a few exercises where we just ran down the runway and we came to a stop. So now with the runway we're going to do the same thing, except this time we're just going to go into a rolling landing. Okay, so what's important about this is if you're not aligned when you do it, you're going to tip the hip over and you're just going to crash. So we'll do the same sort of thing where at first we're trying to decelerate and maintain an altitude, and then once we probably get out to less than 100 kilometers per hour, as we start to decelerate more, we'll just allow ourselves to go lower and lower. Now I'm using the pedals to align with the runway. I want to make sure I'm straight, and I want to make sure when we touch down that either the right main hits first, or if we're going fast enough, both the mains will touch down about the same time. Now that was kind of hard because I was busy talking to you. We'll try it again. This is a super easy exercise. And this is useful because you can do this also in the field. That's what's great about the hip. You can land on the open fields and just roll. You don't have to come to a perfect hover. In fact, I don't like doing that a lot of times because it's faster to just do a rolling landing in combat to get the troops out quickly. So we'll try that off in the infield here. So the important thing is with the pedals, you want to make sure you're aligned with your flight path, and then slowly with the collective, just notch it down little by little and figure out where that descent rate is, where it's acceptable. Okay, and now we're kind of in ground effect. You heard the warning go off, and I can feel it on the controls. It kind of got into this bubble feeling. Now if I let go of the cyclic, look what it's still wanting to do. It's wanting to do that left tilt. That's what kills most people. If you can master that, you're pretty good with. You'll be good with landings, I promise. Okay, so practice the rolling landings. Use the runway first, and then you can just use whatever big field. Okay. For the most part, when you're doing troop drops with the hip, you really don't have to do those cool hot drops. You know, in fact, they're really dangerous. But most of the times when I'm figuring out a spot to put troops, it's somewhere that I could comfortably put troops, where I can do something like this, where I'm just cruising really low, adding in my collective here. I feel like I'm in ground effect. The alarm went off, and look at that. It's just nice and smooth. Okay. The biggest thing is I'm holding right cyclic. Okay. I should probably put all this stuff on for you guys to see. I'll do one more. Go this way. Okay. Kind of fast here. Let it slow down some, so I want to pull back on the cyclic, but as I do that, I got to dip the collective lower and then pull it back in as we get slower. Just make ourselves aligned with the runway using the pedals here, and I'm putting in a little, look at that right cyclic on the control indicator, and it's holding us kind of straight here. Okay, you can find a sweet spot where it's almost level, but it's just easier to hang back on the right and do the right main, and then left main, and then we're down. Okay. Okay, so for we'll try a hot landing or something like to that effect. Now, there's so much that goes on when you're doing one of these that it's hard to tell you how to do that all the time, because every time it's different. And it's all dependent on how much energy you've got at that one moment, how that energy is being shed, if you have room to shed it a certain way or not. Let's see here. So there's a couple things when it comes to these hot landings. So one of them is if you're doing the actual drop for the first time, or you're putting some guys on the ground, you just have to be within 4 kilometers of the enemy target if you're flying on Enigma's Cold War. So it really doesn't matter that you're behind a certain building or in a certain field. It just matters that you get down within 4 kilometers. So we'll demonstrate that, because that's something I think that people freak out about, landing in an exact spot, and they really don't need to, because they've got a 4 kilometer buffer of where they could put troops. The other part is, and we'll get to that too, is going to a specific spot, because you got to pick the guys up, and that's a bit more dangerous because you've got to be really precise. All right, we'll build up our speed. Let's say we get up to like 250 kilometers per hour, and okay, I'm within 4 kilometers, let's just say, of where I need to drop troops. Okay, it's beyond it's on the other side of this town. I don't want to get high, so I'm gonna dump my collective, and you can hear that the noises there. Okay, I'm pulling back. Still, the collective is fully down. Okay, pulling back some more. And this is that exercise where we're trying to maintain altitude. This is why it's important, because you don't want to be seen. You want to stay at a certain altitude, and you want to dump all that speed. Okay. So now I'm adding the collective back in. We get that shaking there. And this is perfect. This just worked out. A lot of times, you might have obstacles in front of you. Oh, this is a great example of that. Look at that. We have the train tracks. Just go around it, and then you're good to go. Okay. Now these hot landings are super simple when it comes to this straight-in sort of thing. You just dump the collective, and you're doing that exercise that we did at the runway, trying to maintain an altitude. You want to stay really low because in ECW, the airplanes will kill you really quickly. All right. Now let's say we have to come back to this field, but we're going super fast. Actually, let's say they came into this field here because they did their targets and they hopped up and they appeared in that spot once they were done with their mission. Okay. So I'm gonna circle back and then we'll do one of those. Okay. We'll just make sure we get some speed built up here. So when it comes to those sort of hot ones, okay. Alright, they're in this, we'll say they're in this field. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at them to see where they're at, and say they're right there. And I'm going to go around, I'm going to overfly them and pass them, because I want to see what obstacles there are. And then we can do a full-on turn back to them. And then as I come off this turn, I'm going to start dumping the collective a lot. Okay, and pull it back in because I need to arrest this descent. Okay. Now we're just going to get to that point where it's going to start to come out, and I'm going to have to add the collective in. And here we are, we're in this field. And add a lot more. There we go. So this is why this stuff's dangerous, but what you can do, the fans there show you that the main rotor RPM is just getting too low, and you can see that happening. There's really not much you can do at that moment except you can blow past the spot you want to land at and just circle back a little bit. You'll just be in the air a little bit longer. But with the hip, the rotor is so massive that you could actually power out of the VRS that's happening, or beginning to happen. If you catch it soon enough, you just go full collective like I did. And it's going to slow your descent a bit. You'll just have to know to decrease that collective back, and once you got the descent rate where you want, lower that collective back so you can get the main rotor RPM to speed up again. So we're fine. We kind of touched down a little bit hard, but yeah. We'll do one more in the same spot, I guess. But if you watch my this is another thing. When that generator fails, that autopilot pitch roll channel is going to go out. Okay, it's not going to come back on automatically, and you can tell when it's not on because the aircraft feels a lot more responsive, but also sort of it's easier to get more oscillations in, and this just stabilizes that. So I always have that mapped to something on the HOTAS, so when it goes out I can turn it back on immediately. Okay, we'll do one more. We'll come in really fast. So when I'm doing that turn, that's about when I'm dumping the collective, and I gotta put some back in as we're still turning towards the spot, because at that point the helicopter will start to fall too much. The thing is, I don't want to get higher than I need to, because like I said, there's going to be aircraft that are looking for you, and they're even ground targets with AAA and stuff will see you over some obstacles. Okay, so we're approaching that field, coming in really fast here, over 250. Yep, I see him down there. Okay, I'll dump the collective. I want to swing out, add more collective in. Okay, use the pedals to help you turn. There we go. Right now we're just managing our descent with the collective and the cyclic, pulling them back to the right. And I could relax a little bit. I'm just focused on adding a bit of cyclic into that ground effect to stop it. And then here we go. We make sure we're aligned. cyclic, and with the pedals, keep the nose straight so we're not going to tip over, and we're down. All right. And that's all. So what I would like you guys to do if you're struggling with this is go practice flying along the runway, go practice trying to dump the speed along the runway and maintain the same altitude. When you get really good at that, practice touching down on the runway, just do rolling landings. And then those are sort of the key things you need here to do the landings out in combat. Most of the troop drops, if you're initiating them, they're going to just be these straight in easy ones where you just find a field somewhere just like this, and as long as you're staying aligned, you're good to go. Just get yourself into that ground effect. If you set your alarm to 10 meters here, and then you should feel it, and you should be able to just kind of ease back on some of the pedal input and some of the collective that you need because you're in the ground effect at that moment, and just stay aligned with your flight path and lower the collective slowly and slowly until you touch down. Now some terrain types are going to suddenly stop you, so sometimes you don't want to be going too fast when you do this. On some surfaces it's almost instantaneous, it'll stop you. Other surfaces you'll have a nice good roll. If you're unsure, you can just hover in the ground effect until you get to a safe speed and just touch down, going a few knots, and you're good to go. Okay, so I don't want to make this too long. If you have any more questions, just comment and I'll get to you as soon as possible, or I can amplify some instructions to help you get you guys going in the hip. That'll be all for me, so I'll see you later. Bye.